What's going on, everyone? So Fred VanVleet is a guy that has been linked to the Lakers for some time now, right? I mean, he's been linked to the Lakers since like last offseason. And he's a guy that very likely might end up leaving the Toronto Raptors. He wants to get paid. He already turned down, based on reports, a $27 million, I believe it was, extension. And that means very likely that he's not going to want to stay with Toronto, right? If he's turning down that kind of money, he's going elsewhere. Now, the Lakers would have to trade for him. Now, they could do a sign and trade type deal where he opts out if he does opt out and go elsewhere. Or the other option is he opts into his contract and the Lakers end up trading for that contract and then extend him eventually, right? Whenever they decide to do. That is the only real options to get Fred VanVleet because he's not going to turn down a $27 million a year contract, or even just his player option right now, which is $22 million, to go to Lakers for, at most, they could get is $14 million. So, at best case, he goes, he opts in, and that way the Lakers could trade for him without having to hard cap themselves. Because if you're the Lakers, you don't want to hard cap yourself. And if the Lakers were going to hard cap themselves for Fred, they're just going to do it for Kyrie Irving because Kyrie Irving's going to get probably about the same amount of money, right? Because Fred wants $30 million. So if you're going to pay $30 million for Fred, you might as well do it for Kyrie Irving, who is the better player, and you'd make LeBron happy, and you'd probably win an NBA championship. So if the Lakers were going to go and target Fred VanVleet, it would have to be via trade. Another guy that was linked to the Lakers around the time of Fred VanVleet that were even reports of the Lakers trying to acquire both of them is Gary Trent Jr. I want Gary Trent Jr. I have wanted Gary Trent. I was saying that I thought the Lakers should just trade for Gary Trent Jr. by himself, right, at this trade deadline. 24 years old, solid two-way shooting guard, a guy that I just think can be a go-to scorer, right? He's a guy that can just do multiple things, and he's young enough. He's only going to get better. He's only going to improve. He, too, has a player option. Now, Fred VanVleet has about just under a $23 million player option, and Gary Trent Jr. has a 18.5, call it $19 million trade exception, right? So collectively, the two of them have about a $42 million in player options. If the Lakers are going to go and trade for Fred VanVleet, I would try to convince Gary Trent Jr. to come as well. Because here's the thing. Toronto is probably going to lose both of them for nothing, right? Because Gary Trent, very likely, especially with his age, is going to opt out, and he'll probably get a $20+ million contract somewhere. Probably get something like 4 years, $80 million. And Fred VanVleet will probably get something like 4 years, $120 million. And if the Lakers are going to trade for one, go trade for both, right? The Lakers could do this. The Lakers could acquire Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr. Rather easily, right? Look, if they're going to go and acquire Fred VanVleet, they're going to have to do it via sign and trade for D'Angelo Russell. It's the only way to really get there. You could do it with Malik Beasley and Mo Bamba. If, let's say, Toronto's like, hey, we want to keep the cap space, and that's something else we'll explore because I do kind of want to talk about that with either of these guys individually. Touch on that in another video, but sticking to Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr., you'd have to do D'Lo. So you basically could get to Fred VanVleet's money with D'Angelo Russell. Again, you would need both of these guys to opt in. So they basically would have to take a bit of a discount, which I don't think it would be as much for Gary Trent as it might be for Fred VanVleet. But they may do that to be on a team like the Lakers, right? So they might look at it and say, yeah, like I'll take, for Fred VanVleet, I'll take $5 million off for 1 year. And Gary Trent could take off, $2-3 million for 1 year to play for the Lakers. So let's go on the assumption that they both opt in. Then at that point, all you need is D'Angelo Russell and Malik Beasley. Give up both your firsts, give up the 17th pick and the 29th pick, and now you got these two guys, and you could have them for the foreseeable future. And now if you're the Lakers, you have Fred VanVleet, Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Gary Trent Jr., Jared Vanderbilt, Max Christie, right? The list goes on and on. You could even kind of play hardball if you're the Lakers, right? Like, if you're the Lakers, you could be like, hey, we're not going to give you both firsts. Maybe just give them the 17th in like 2 seconds, right? Because look, Toronto's going to lose these guys regardless. So if you're the Lakers, you just go, hey, like, lose them for nothing or get a first round pick and a couple seconds. You get Malik Beasley, you can waive his money, and you got D'Angelo Russell as a trade chip, right? There you go. Like, it could be a win-win for everybody. You could give D'Lo like $22 million, $23 million to match Fred VanVleet's contract, and then just add Malik Beasley. Malik Beasley is $16.5 million to $18.5 million. With the 125% rule, you clear that. Let's say Toronto's like, hey, or let's say the Lakers are like, hey, we don't want to take on the extra $1.5 million or whatever. We'll just give you Shaquille Harris, and there you go, right? And then even after LeBron, you'd still have Fred VanVleet, Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, Gary Trent Jr., Jared Vanderbilt, Anthony Davis. Like, you are stacked with young talent at that point. I think that that's a team that you can win an NBA championship. Your guard rotation is Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., Austin Reeves, and like Max Christie. It's not bad at all, right? Not bad at all. And you still have LeBron James who could play point guard. I do. I think if the Lakers could work something like this out, why not? Why not? I'm not like super high personally on Fred VanVleet. But if you could get Gary Trent in the process, then why not? I'm not like if the Lakers just traded D'Angelo Russell for Fred VanVleet, I kind of think that's redundant unless you're just doing an even swap, because the Lakers most likely would have to give up assets, because I don't think Toronto's going to give up assets. They're better just letting Fred just walk. And I just don't think Fred VanVleet is more valuable than D'Angelo Russell by himself. And on top of that, if the Lakers have to give up even a couple seconds, I don't think even if you believe that Fred VanVleet is a better player than D'Angelo Russell, which if you go look at the previous video I did, I give you all the facts showing that he's not. But even if you're somebody that ignores that and says, I still believe Fred VanVleet is the better player, is he better? Is he that much better that he's worth a first round pick or something like that? I don't think so. Right? But now if you could get Gary Trent Jr. in that deal, again, a 24, 25-year-old, a guy that could come in, play multiple positions, 6'5", averaging 18 points per game, right? Like, if you could do something like that, then sure, right? Like, let's do that. Sign me up for that. I would love something like that, because at that point now you basically have your front court, or your backcourt rotation for the next 5+ years at least, in Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., Austin Reeves, and Max Christie. There you go. That's basically your 4 guard rotation for the next several years, right? You could even now, because Max Christie is bumped up to like 6'7", something like that. He could even be the 3 spot now. So you could even do that. I mean, you could even go Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., and Max Christie at times. It just would give you some flexibility, right? Versatility. Fred VanVleet, a little undersized, but he is an above average defender, so that helps. So you'd be a good defensive team. You'd have some offense, some shooting, some scoring. Fred VanVleet is good at playing off the ball, so he could even play off of Austin Reeves. He's also could play well off of LeBron James. If you can get both of these, I say go ahead, right? If you're just signing and trading for Fred VanVleet, I don't think it's worth it. I don't. But if you can get Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr., then that I say you do. I absolutely think cool. Like, if you can turn D'Angelo Russell and Malik Beasley into Gary Trent and Fred VanVleet, at that point I think it's an upgrade. Because again, I think D'Angelo Russell is better than Fred VanVleet, but I think Gary Trent Jr. is all around better than Malik Beasley, because Malik Beasley is kind of one-dimensional. If he's not shooting the lights out, it's kind of redundant. Where Gary Trent, he can still make plays. He can still get to the basket. He's a 3-level scorer. He can shoot. What was it, 2 years ago? He had like the most 30-point games in the league, I think, behind like James Harden or something like that. So he's a guy that can score, put the ball in the hoop, shoot the 3-ball, shoot 2-ball, do everything. If you can get these guys, I think you do it. I really do. I wouldn't mind if the Lakers just traded for Gary Trent Jr. Like, if, let's say, Toronto, like, he doesn't want to re-sign in Toronto, if you could swap Malik Beasley in, like, 2 seconds for Gary Trent Jr., I think you do that. I really do. Maybe that's another video. Maybe we'll talk about that independently so this doesn't become like a 30-minute video. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I pass the question on to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Do you think, yeah, go get both of them if you can? Do you think no? How do you feel? Whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it, so let me know down in the comments below.